Specialist here at Mailgun.
And I'm Nick, Deliverability Engineer here at Mailgun.
And before we kind of get rolling, because as y'all know, this is the 2019 predictions webinar. We know that we've been putting messages out there, both in our emails and on our social media, about a cake. And the cake was not a lie.
We weren't lying. There is actually a cake, and it even looks like an email.
I heart email, and it's beautiful. And I don't want to tip it too much because then it will fall over, and then we're all in misery. So yeah. So to really just kind of kick off this webinar, right? We wanted to kind of reminisce on 2018 a little bit on some things that went down last year with different sending and for me, like different marketing things that went on. And then we'll just kind of roll into 2019 and see where it goes. So
and what better way to do all that than to eat cake while you're doing it?
So much cake.
And why are we doing this, Natalie?
So I don't know if y'all remember the Tina Fey sketch from SNL in which she ate sheet cake and just kind of let her emotions roll.
That was a good one.
It was a good one.
And this is a good cake.
It is. I haven't tried it yet. Is it good?
It is good.
Oh, it is really good.
Yeah. So as Natalie mentioned, we're kind of going to go over like an overview of some things that happened in 2018 and give some predictions of what we think is going to happen in 2019 and how we foresee things kind of playing out. So 2018, obviously, there were some big things that happened. Probably the biggest thing was May 25th, 2018. You know, that date will kind of live in infamy. That was GDPR, of course. So that had a lot of marketers worried. They didn't know what was going to happen to their list.
Yeah.
Obviously privacy was, extremely important. The reality is, or what happened was, marketers had to clean up their list. Everyone that was, based in the EU, they had to make sure that they had implied consent for those users or they couldn't mail them. Which honestly, that was a good practice for, keeping up with your list hygiene, things of that nature. There's probably a lot of old addresses in your list that probably you shouldn't be sending to anyways.
Yeah.
So I think all in all, it remains to be seen. What exactly is going to happen. I know Google was the first one that just got fined 50 million euros. I expect there to be some more companies that get hit with fines in the coming year. But yeah. All in all, make sure you have consent, implied consent of all the recipients that you're mailing to. You should be doing that anyways.
Yeah, definitely.
Some other small things. There were obviously, the Oath merger was a big thing that led to a lot of frustration for marketers. Mm-hmm. AOL, Verizon all going to Yahoo's back end. And even at the beginning of 2018, there was still a lot of stuff going on with the Microsoft change where they were moving everything to the O365 backend. So there were some big things that happened in 2018. And I'm sure there's going to be some things that happen in 2019 that kind of frustrate senders in general as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that at least from the marketing perspective, right? Like for email sending, especially with the Oath merger, some people saw deliverability issues because that was a really big change up. And then just thinking about marketing as a whole, right? Because as email is a part of...
I'm sorry, I'm just going to have another bite. It's really good.
Just a part of kind of the overarching digital marketing space, right? Email is a part of it. I do think that there are ways that email could improve by looking at sort of the successes and the shortcomings of things like influencer marketing and social media marketing. So, I think we all have watched the Fire Festival documentaries, which were pretty scathing.
Yeah, I actually watched it last night. That documentary or video was intense, to say the least.
Yeah, it was a lot. And so kind of seeing how powerful influencers can be, but also seeing some of the scandals that came out, beyond even just Fire Festival, old Twitter histories being brought up that were a big yikes. And then with social media marketing and advertising, data protection, and how much Facebook and other brands like that, like Twitter, actually know about you from your digital footprint and your histories there and sort of how they utilize that. But there are some good things that can be taken from those that email can use. And that's kind of be talking about my 2019 for email marketing.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I guess one of my biggest predictions for 2019 is something that's kind of already been in play, but I think it's going to be more in play. And whenever I say that, I'm talking about domain reputation and the importance of that. IP reputation way back in the day was really the only thing that mailbox providers could really filter off of. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that today that just doesn't work because, bad senders, bad actors, spammers, they will hop from IP to IP and basically snowshoe spam out. So it's much more difficult to block by IPs if they're constantly changing. And then at the same time, you could have a bad actor end up on a shared IP that causes issues. And if mailbox providers were to block, that shared IP, there may be really, really legitimate, senders on that IP, and they're getting impacted.
Right.
At the end of the day, mailbox providers want their users to get messages that they want to receive and filter out the bad stuff, obviously. But, because, IP-based blocking could cause impact, like I just mentioned, they have to kind of evolve. And I think domain reputation is going to be more and more important, especially with things like, DMARC coming out, not coming out, but being more widely adopted. I think that's the direction we're heading in. Kind of like a mini prediction of sorts. I feel like mailbox providers, like Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, I think they're going to start rewarding customers for sending, fully authenticated, aligned messages with, taking ownership of their domains.
Right.
And by rewarding them, I'm thinking, there's already something out there called BIMI, which will basically show logos for you on messages that you're sending. Basically, where you'll see like the from address, you also get a logo, which is great for like brand recognition. That's extremely important. So I feel like that's coming. And I've actually talked to, different, mailbox provider representatives at conferences, and they've mentioned things like that, domain reputation being, much better at making decisions than IPs. So I feel that's going to come. And just recently today, I think there was an announcement that Google's going to start doing some new things with the promotions tab, adding annotations and images. So it just seems like that's where things are moving. So, one thing about that is I think Mailgun is honestly kind of set up to help senders with that, because we've always, required customers to add DCOM signatures, obviously SPF, and we're helping customers set up DMARC for their domains.
Right.
With a lot of like shared systems, messages may be getting signed by like the ESP's domain, but on Mailgun, you've always kind of had ownership of your domain. We always sign it with your domain. So I think that's going to help push customers to get more aligned and incorporate DMARC and other domain reputation things.
Yeah, I think it's all a good thing, especially going more towards domains. Because, you think about smaller senders who are on those shared IPs, you can't warrant getting a dedicated IP just yet because you just don't have the traffic. And that's fine, right? Like, it's a lot better to have your reputation based on what you are actually sending and not someone who's on a shared IP that you've never met before, especially if they suddenly decide to use a really old list, never clean it up, and then it just sort of goes to the wayside, ruins your IP reputation. Like, I think domain is the right way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so a prediction for me, and this is a big one, and I'm kind of taking a page right from social media ads, is segmentation and personalization. So what I mean by that is when you think about social media ads, you're able to get so personalized, hyper-personalized, hyper-segmented audiences. And these backends of these ad engines like say, okay, well, here's the United States, or, here's the UK. Let's go by city. Let's go by mile radius. And then let's go by languages. Let's go by spending brackets. Let's go by interests. These are all things that allow you to get super, super granular. And you can do the same thing with email when you're thinking about personalizing messages, instead of, and what I mean by personalization is, for at least Mailgun, is recipient variables. So things like a first name token, right? If you are writing an email, instead of just saying, hey, everybody, or like just hi, like just a blank hi, it could say, like, hi, Nick. Or
personalization definitely matters.
Yeah. And always, of course, be sure that you have something as a placeholder for people who don't fill in the first name tab. So whether that's like a hi there or a howdy or what have you, something that just sort of fills that space, because it'd be really embarrassing if they're like, thanks for never remembering my first name. It's not insert first name here.
That actually brings up a funny thing that I saw back during GDPR, of course. So all these senders were sending out, privacy policy updates to their users lists, and these might have been really ancient lists. But something that was funny is, they had like first names, but what's funny, what I saw, and I think I saw some tweets about this and different examples, was some of these users were trying to be funny, I guess, when they signed up and gave funny names, like insert curse word. I think I saw like poop head was the person's name or something. Like, what? Come on.
So mature.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of funny if you send out a personalized message and they get that. It's like, well, that's what you put as your name, so.
Yeah, it can get a little funny with personalization, but it really does go the extra mile, right? And with segmentation in mind, right? Like, start thinking about, your market funnels. Start thinking about your sales funnels. Like, think about different markers that you would want to hit with segmentation. So whether that be, say you have like a low spending, like a top tier quality service, right? And then a couple of lower tiers, but you kind of want to send a marketing campaign to only people who are in your top spenders who live, like your top spenders who constantly open your emails, who are engaged. Mm-hmm. You want to send a marketing message to them, and you want them to know that it's personalized. So pairing segmentation and personalization and sending out those emails to highly segmented areas just get that much more bang for your buck with email, right?
Yeah.
Because it's possible. It just requires a little extra legwork that I think is definitely worth it for what you can get out of it.
Yeah, you can get so granular with segments. Like, that's what is something that's really powerful about email, and really it gets you a good return on what you're doing. Obviously, as a deliverability person, I'm always telling our customers, let's segment your list by engagement, and that is extremely important. But you can take it further with all these additional kind of segments that Natalie is mentioning. The engagement segmentations is usually there to help build up reputations or repair reputations, or just keep your reputations where they need to be to, have your deliverability where it needs to be, make sure you're hitting inboxes. So Don't just look at engagement, look at all these other things like Natalie's talking about whenever you're preparing to do campaigns.
Yeah, definitely. And when you're playing around with segments, or if you're scared to do segments, right? Because sometimes I think people can get a little antsy when it comes to, taking a nice big list and making it this big.
Yeah.
It's scary. It is a scary thing to do. But if you are feeling a little apprehensive, like, also don't be afraid to do any sort of A/B testing with your emails. Like, see which headers work, see which personalization tokens work. If there's one that you're kind of on the fence about, maybe do an A/B test where you send emails with personalization tokens and then ones without. So, one on, one off, and actually see the results and see that return to get a better idea of what your strategy should be going forward with your email.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. You mentioned something like it's scary for marketers, and believe me, I completely understand this. Whenever you have to shrink the size of your list.
Right.
Whenever we're doing these segments, especially like the engagement segments, we're not saying that get rid of those users that haven't engaged in a period of time, but maybe send to them less often. Like really boost up your reputation by sending to the people that genuinely want to receive your messages and have shown in the past the behaviors that, they are really enthusiastic and hyper engaged whenever they get messages from you.
Right.
Run re-engagement campaigns on those users that maybe, haven't engaged in a while.
Yeah, and even like with a re-engagement campaign, you could even do something like, hey, are you still there? Do you still want to keep seeing these messages? So then it's like you're running a re-engagement campaign, but you're also kind of cleaning your list at the same time. You're letting them see a message and be like, oh, well, maybe no, I don't, and then they go, and that's fine. It does the work for you.
Yeah. And generally, people aren't going to complain against a message like that. Too.
Yeah, no.
Like,
it's considerate.
If you're asking, like, hey, do you still want to receive our messages? Like, and they don't, well, then that's fine. But they aren't going to just mark it as spam.
Right. Yeah. What's your next prediction, Nick? I'm curious.
My next prediction is it's something that I've heard a lot and read about a lot, and I expect it to just gain traction. I think marketers are going to wake up, and that prediction is, the return on investment that marketers get from email is through the roof. I like to use this analogy. I was just in Vegas at a conference. Like whenever you're playing blackjack and you get like 11 on your first 2 cards, you're like, I'm going to double down. I'm going to double down on that because the return is going to be there. I feel like in the same sense, marketers are going to be looking at, past performance, seeing the return that they get on email. And that return is, I read a report recently, I think from Litmus, said for every dollar spent, email marketers see $38 returned. That's massive. So I think, marketers are going to, catch on to that, and they're going to double down on email. They're going to send more. And whenever we say send more, we don't mean just blindly send to your whole list. We mean getting those segments that Natalie was just mentioning about, and doing more, personalized message, looking at your users' past engagements, what they're interested in, and just really doubling down and sending more of what they want. That doesn't mean just double your volume throughout the year. It just means budget more for your email marketing campaigns. I saw some charts where, the different mediums like social media or radio or other things, like the return just isn't the same, yet companies are still putting more and more money into those, and email is kind of like stayed stagnant. It's like flatlined, which is strange because the returns have always been there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right, that you mentioned people putting more and more money into social media efforts, because I think a lot of people are just like, oh, I got this, I did a reach campaign where I'm trying to reach more people, and I reached all these people.
Yeah.
And then they look at the click-through rate and they're like, I'm sure that's a good click-through rate, but then they don't actually know, because they don't know for their industry, or they just assume, right, that it's going to be this super small thing, and then like, they click through, but then they don't have any sort of tracking set up on their website to actually track where they go. And the other thing is that these social media companies are pushing up those prices, and they will. And as far as those ads go, they don't have to tell you that they're increasing the cost per click. So it's one of those things that, like, you can get so highly customized with emails too, and the look and feel and the voice, and there's so much more breathing room for the content that you're making and putting in there. Whereas with social media, it's a very minute, small space, right? And sure, you can get really granular, right? But they're still kind of increasing that dollar for the same returns that some people don't even know what the ROI for social media is.
Yep. I think that's important too.
Yeah.
Like, just understand where your money's going and the return you're getting. And I think a lot of people probably don't understand that, or have looked into it enough to realize what they're getting.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's interesting. And you hear so many people be like, well, maybe I'll go to influencers, right? And then that kind of goes back to, well, you never know what an influencer will do. You can't exactly control that voice that they're putting out there. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's tough out there.
So what say you, content marketing specialist? What's your final prediction for 2019?
So my final prediction, and this has been one of those things that, like, it's one of those, like, everybody says it every year sort of things, but it is really important, especially when we think about these influencers, like I was just saying, is content. This is another content heavy year, because it's one thing to send like hey, we're having a sale, right? Mm-hmm. And it's another to create like actual good content. So looking at things like, are you putting out a newsletter? Yeah. How often are you sending out that newsletter? What sort of content are you putting in there? If you are, making these newsletters, like, how can you get creative with it, right? Like, how can you make it something that somebody will see and want to click on? And then you also have to think about, okay, well, if I'm landing in the promotions tab, how am I going to be seen, right? And I say promotions tab. Some people like wince when you say Gmail promotions tab.
I absolutely do.
Yeah, and I guess if you kind of want to speak to more, because I personally love the promotions tab. I think it's great.
Yeah, so the promotions tab is an interesting one, and what I mentioned earlier is going to help marketers, with the new stuff that Gmail's doing for promotions tab. But in general, there's this, false sense of, filtering in what the promotions folder is. Like I can't tell you how many customers have come to me and said, we're getting filtered to spam, whenever in actuality they're just getting filtered to promotions. And I don't know, you love the promotions tab. I do as well. I go and check it every day. It's still the inbox. That means you have a good reputation with Google. In this case, when we're talking about the promotions tab, it's just something in your message looks to be promotional. So, I mean, if you don't want to end up in the promotional folder, maybe take a look at what you're sending. Maybe there's some links that are promoting something on your website. I know the more links you have, the higher the chance of landing in the promotional folder. But I mean, one thing that you can do is talk to your users. Gmail does listen to the behavior. So if you tell them, if you send an email that says, hey, if you're getting this in the promotions tab, but you want it in your primary folder, just move it over there. That'll train the systems. Mm-hmm. But, all in all, the promotions folder is a good thing. That's where the promotions go. So, depending on the time of the day, maybe in the morning, I check just, my primary folder or my primary tab. But in the evening, I go through and look at, promotions to see, what the brands I subscribe to are offering. So what that means is you might see a change in the time when your users open messages, but all in all, you probably will not see a big difference between open rates whenever we're talking primary versus promotional folder. Mm-hmm. It's just the time in which they do open that message.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is so important is to kind of think about your audience, right? Who are they? When are they going to their promotions tab, right? So a good example, and I like to use this personal example when I talk about emails is, I love geeky t-shirts. I love geeky t-shirts. I love daily t-shirts. I love seeing how they change every day. Yep. And I like knowing what that change is going to be at the beginning of the day because that's when the sale starts. Mm-hmm. So getting a daily t-shirt email, my promotions tab, is something I click on every single day because it's new content, stuff I want to see, stuff I might even want to buy. And that's kind of when I check. I'm checking it, before as I'm getting ready on my way to come here. Yep. So
she does bring some pretty cool t-shirts to the office each and every day. It's something new.
Yeah, I was wearing my Rad Dog t-shirt earlier this week. So, those are things to think about is when are people opening it? Who knows? You could have an audience that is really big on opening promotional emails at 8 p.m. at night. Yeah. Who knows why, but that's when they're engaging. So it's important to think about that and thinking about the content that you're creating that is appropriate for your audience and the time you're sending it.
Yeah. What Natalie mentioned is something that you should know about your recipients, the people that you're sending messages to. You should know when they open messages. And Mailgun makes all of that information available. If you're using our tracking feature, then we'll basically give you information about when your users are clicking and opening messages, and you can target those users at those specific times. Obviously, you can do segment by, you mentioned segment, but I don't think you mentioned locale, unless I just didn't hear it. But I mean, if you have people on the East Coast, on the West Coast, or international, look at that information and see what the best time of the day is to send to them. Yeah. I know Mailgun's working on some tools that will help with things like that as well in the future, and we have a lot of other things that we're excited about bringing out in the coming year.
No, this year is really excited for stuff that we're going to be sending out. But to just kind of what Nick said, it's totally different to send an email to the entire United States, and it's another to send an email to someone in Texas, or someone in California or someone in Iowa. It's going to be very different send times, different content. How you personalize it is different. So it's like I said, segmentation, personalization, content.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to give the users something that is going to entice them to engage with your messages. So if you're just doing a blanket, promotion to all your users at the same time, that's not going to have as good engagement as if you were segmenting and getting more personalized down to what the user wants or expects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even when you're creating those offers, think about the segment you're building, right? Okay, who's this audience? How can I grab their attention, right? So, people in Texas who are high spenders, You know, what would that offer look like? What would that offer look like to that part of my audience? So those are some questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about what you have to offer. And it's also like content, like even with emails, like if you want to start creating more video content or more audio content, absolutely go for it, but don't embed like every single video that you've done in the past month into one singular email. Like that's a bad idea. However, do link over to your website and be sure you have the proper tracking so that it is appropriate for one, actually going to the inbox, because if you just flood them with a bunch of videos and images, it's not going to look right. It's likely to break. Just keep that in mind.
Don't want to overwhelm your users with an email. The whole point of an email is to get people interested and then back to your website, right? Like you don't want to give them, way too much stuff on a single email that they're just like, oh, this is too much. I'm just going to skim over it or I'm just going to delete it.
Yeah.
So give them what they want and what they expect.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So what do you think of the cake, Nick? Just out of
I
curiosity.
think this cake is wonderful.
It's delightful.
It's y'all probably can't see this, but it's actually funfetti. It's my daughter's favorite kind.
Yeah, it's a funfetti cake.
I love it.
We should have said that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, all in all, I know one of the questions we posed, with this webinar was, what do we expect to change? But not only that, what's changed with email best practices? Really nothing. I mean, the email best practices are going to hold true. You have to do things the right way. You have to build your list the correct way. You have to, make sure you're getting consent with the users that are, signing up. Protect your forms. I know mail bombing is still a huge thing, so put CAPTCHA in place on your forms, and just keep your list up to date. Go through hygiene processes, incorporate a sunset policy. That all is going to continue to hold true, and engagement really trumps all. If people are engaged with your messages, then you're going to have a good experience.
Yeah, and if anything with email best practices, like it's more important going into this new year to be sure that you're practicing.
Start the year off on the right foot.
Yeah, absolutely, because now is the best time. It might not be a new year, new email, but it is a new year, new better sending habits for yourself if you aren't already doing them.
Absolutely.
You want to move on to questions while we continue to
What kind of questions do we have? Let's see. Is it common for Mailgun's IPs to get blocked by providers like Outlook and Hotmail? So those, providers, specifically Microsoft. I wouldn't say it's common, but yes, it does happen. With our shared IPs, it kind of goes into the first part of this conversation. Mailbox providers don't want to do that, but right now there is a lot of IP-based filtering that goes on. So say a bad actor gets onto Mailgun, they get onto our systems, they get onto all ESPs. They want to use our infrastructure.
Right.
If they do get by, our security measures, which we're constantly tweaking to improve things, then they could have an impact on the IP, cause it to get blocked. That's something that is always possible with shared IPs, unfortunately. Yeah. Dedicated IPs, if you have enough volume, is always a good option. I know a lot of customers that are sitting on Mailgun use dedicated IPs and are having a lot of success. But, at the same time, the Outlook stuff does happen, or the blocks with Outlook and Hotmail. It does happen, and it's something we're constantly, working with them on, and like I said, protecting our systems to prevent them. But they could still pop up from time to time.
Yeah. It's our next one. Ooh. So it's a long one.
This is a long one. I sent a test email last night, and it went to Gmail spam. I think Google has a new algorithm that is more aggressive. Simple notifications went to inbox just fine, but this test had a shipping address and product information, and it went to spam. Sucks because it will be important to email for my users. What can I do to change that? I think one of the key things that you mentioned there is, Google changing something with their algorithms. That's something that is constantly happening. Email is always evolving.
Gmail is always evolving.
All of them are, but Gmail especially, they have, really advanced algorithms. They could get stuff wrong sometimes too. So they'll tweak things. But the whole reason behind all this is, spammers. Unfortunately, they cause, a lot of frustration with legitimate marketers, legitimate senders, because maybe some little piece of your content matched something that, maybe a spammer.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be exactly like if they see some kind of similar patterns, then it could, cause some filtering. With your particular example with the shipping address, maybe something, falsely was categorized. And like I said, Google's constantly updating things, so it could change. But feel free to reach out to our support team, and we can do some digging in on that, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see. Could you talk on use cases for webhooks and when you expect legacy webhooks to expire? Also, why were the webhooks updated? Please let us know.
I don't know if I have the best answer for that, so we can kind of take that one offline if you want to reach out to us. I definitely don't know when or if we expect to, expire the old legacy webhooks. But yeah, we can find that information out for you.
Yeah. So this next one is, when will domain reputation be adopted? What do you think? I feel like we kind of touched on it in the webinar.
Well, I mean, it's already adopted.
Yeah.
Everyone's using it to some extent. I just think it's going to be weighted more heavily. The same thing like the first question, IP gets blocked. Legitimate senders could be sending receipts. I know we have a lot of businesses that send on Mailgun that are sending receipts. And if the IP is blocked, customer's not getting the receipt that they need. The mailbox providers understand this. They get complaints from their users about why was this message, filtered, what's going on. And, if that continues to happen, people will switch over to another service. People will switch to Gmail, for example. I know Gmail has such a dominance in the email market.
They do, yeah.
I don't know what the number is, but I know it's massive. And the interesting thing there is I've seen some articles and reports where, international or regional mailbox providers, the small ones, are losing a lot of the market share because of things like this happening, where they're not getting messages that they really need. So they move on to like something like Gmail, which is why they continue to grow and grow. So when will it be adopted? Like I said, it already is. I expect to see changes, this year, probably. That's what I'm thinking, at least. And I hope so, because, with the move to DMARC, more and more senders are absolutely adopting it. We've seen that. We're helping more customers get DMARC set up. So that's, just putting, like I said, it's making sure the sender is responsible for their domain. And I think mailbox providers will realize that.
Yeah. I'm LOLing at my, just kidding. What would you say is one of the strictest email providers for filtering spam? These are so many Nick questions.
No marketing questions for our content marketing specialist? So what would you say is one of the strictest email providers for filtering spam?
Ooh.
I mean, honestly, I think that's an easy one, actually. I think Microsoft is the strictest for sure.
That's fair.
All their properties, Outlook.com, Hotmail.com, MSN, I think, and Live.
They are tough.
And they have been for years. I think in the past, or in 2018, with a lot of the changes that they did, it's got even harder. And at some of the conferences I go to, we've actually heard Microsoft talk on sessions about they understand like the problems that senders are having, but they kind of show us, or in the conferences or the sessions, they've told us why. It's because they get inundated with spam each and every day, and they are constantly fighting to prevent that. So whenever you're doing that, sometimes you unfortunately, have false positives or you incorrectly classify, messages from legitimate senders. I would say, no doubt, they're probably the most strictest of the email providers.
We got our last one, I do believe. So what volumes of mail must be sent to achieve a good reputation from a dedicated IP?
Yeah, so this one is a tough question. And this one does not have a straightforward answer, unfortunately. Like, I wish I could just say, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000. It's not that easy. So there's a couple reasons why it's not that easy. One is it depends on the distribution of your list. If you had a list that was, 100% yahoo.com addresses, and then you're continually sending to those, and then you try to send to Hotmail or Gmail, they aren't going to know anything about that address.
Yeah.
So it's all about the distribution. If you have an evenly distributed mailing list, I've seen customers send as few as 50,000 messages a month and have have success. I would like to see more than that, but it's possible. It's all about the content you're sending and what the recipients are doing with the messages. But it doesn't take a whole lot to at least build a solid reputation.
Yeah, for sure. We got another one. Let's see. So, what are some good opt-out strategies to maintain subscribers? So this kind of goes into that re-engagement campaign, right? Like if you have a really old list and you're not sure, who's really still engaged, does this person even have this, like, do they even log on anymore? Some good ones are to run a re-engagement campaign. And you could even start with just asking, like, hey, are you still there? And then a lot of times you might even want to ask like a re-up in the sign up, so to speak. And you kind of should have already done this alongside with GDPR, but then also just be like, hey, if you don't want to receive our messages anymore, that's totally fine, but we just wanted to see if you were still interested. And a lot of times that will either prompt people to unsubscribe, or they might not even, if they never open it and they never reply and they never do anything to it, I think it's safe to assume that they're just gone, right? So looking at them on a user by user basis and then saying, okay, these people engaged, they do want to stay, let's keep them in. These people already unsubscribed, that takes care of itself. These people never opened it, never looked at it, never engaged whatsoever, take them off. And then just opt out. Like when you're making signups, be absolutely clear what the person is signing up for. So if it be a newsletter or like a product update email or something like that, be sure to state like, this is what you're signing up for. And another good thing is to like have options. So it could be like sign up for all of our marketing messages, sign up for just our newsletter, sign up for just our blog updates. That way you can kind of create different curated lists, one that's all marketing messages, only blog updates, only newsletters. That way it's opting in to opt out, right? Like they're opting in to receive these messages. And then the ones that they said, nah, that's the opt out.
I mean, it's important just to get the preferences of your users, like in general. Like you want to understand as much as you can about the user so you can keep them happy. To go back to the question, I kind of wanted to add on to something that you mentioned. The turnover rate of email is really high, like 30%, I think, each year. People abandon their addresses or move on to another one, especially with B2B. Like people leave their jobs and get new email addresses. So, sometimes you are going to lose a chunk of your list, but to keep them, entice them, give them a better offer. Like if they are actually still there, they just aren't doing anything with their messages, but they are still using that email address, give them a better offer, like to kind of keep them around, to entice them to get re-engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to the content, like double down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm thinking of developing a product. Does coming soon or sign up to be notified do coming soon or sign up to be notified sites work well for building a list to promote the product once it's ready? Me personally, from a marketing perspective, I absolutely think so. Say you are developing different social media profiles, right? It's good to have something to link back to. The coming soon sites, it is good to kind of have like just a taste of what it's going to be. So that people do know what they are signing up for. At least as far as like, if it does say sign up to receive, product update emails or announcement emails, things like that, that kind of goes back to the opting in, opting out that we were speaking to earlier. But it's good to have that site. So if you do make these social media profiles, you can link to that site. But should you decide to maybe like come to an email service provider, you're looking for a way to send email messages, it's good to have that if you sign up for a contact sheet. So it's not like you just being like, hi, I'm making a thing, but I'm not going to tell you about it. So it's good to have the website because it is saying that you're serious. So it's something to consider. Definitely.
I think something like on top of this, just in general with signups or opt-in forms, make sure you have them protected. I mentioned mail bombing very briefly towards the beginning, but that's real. Like people will abuse forms. We see it each and every day. So make sure you put some kind of CAPTCHA protection or something on your forms, but also do email validation on your forms. Mailgun has a product for email validation, so we can absolutely help there. But you want to make sure you are capturing legitimate email addresses for people that want messages, because I can tell you, I see so many bad email addresses get into people's lists and they continually send to them. So I think that's really important. That's at the entry to your mailing list. So you need to make sure you're capturing the right information.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Do you want to read this one aloud, or do you want me to read it aloud?
Is Mailgun considering adding email to text, like input a phone number as an email? That jumped where phone number as an email, and Mailgun does the lookup to deliver the text. That I'm not particularly sure of. I have heard it come up, email to SMS, stuff like that. Again, reach out to us and for more information. I'm not the best one to answer that question, though. I don't know if you have any information on it.
Yeah, I don't have any information on it, but if that's something that you are interested in seeing us do, I cannot stress enough using our user voice site. That's where we get most of our suggestions and our feedback. We've used it in the past to develop new products, and we take those suggestions to heart, especially our dev team when we're looking at like product roadmaps for this year and next year. So go to our user voice site. We did do a blog post on it recently. So if you're not sure where to, what that link is, check out our blog, and we'll post it up in the chat as well.
Yeah, there's definitely been features built off of that user voice feedback.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. Trend-wise, are you seeing better engagement rates from simpler templates or more design-heavy ones? So that largely depends on your audience.
Yep.
It definitely does, because if your audience is, say, a mid-20s minimalist, like northerner, they work for a tech company, they are single or in a partnership, things like that, then those people are going to prefer a minimalist design. Whereas, like, if you slapped them with a design-heavy email template, they might be kind of taken aback. It might sort of be too cluttered for them, and then they just hit spam, right? Or they hit unsubscribe. So it definitely depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah,
you're sending to.
Not only the audience, but also the type of business or what you're doing.
Yeah, also think about your product.
Like I've seen, a lot of bloggers successfully do really great email campaigns, but they're really simple, or some of them are. They're really simple messages. Like they're talking to their audience. They're just telling them about maybe a blog post or a story. So it really just depends. Like if you're an e-commerce site, you're probably going to have more content heavy stuff with images and things like that. So yeah, it just depends really.
Yeah, and if you're kind of having this talk internally, it's a great idea to just kind of sit down and be like, okay, what have we done in the past? What has worked and what hasn't? And then kind of, again, run some A/B tests to sort of see. But again, it depends on your brand and it depends on your audience.
Yeah, A/B tests, like you've mentioned it a couple of times, they are really helpful.
Yeah,
so you can see which way is working out better. And we just did a blog post on A/B testing as well. So take a look at that if you haven't read that already.
Let's see. Is there a reliable way to get an idea of my inbox placement for different providers?
I love this question. Yes and no. So yes, but probably not in the way you're thinking. There are services out there like that provide panel data. Obviously, there's services out there that do seed-based data. Those are all good, but they should only be used as indicators, and they shouldn't be taken as gospel. Like it's not everything. Like it could there could be some fluctuations. There could be some just incorrect information. Like especially with seed addresses, they're not real users, so you may start to see messages get filtered as junk, even if like in general, like that message would get delivered to the inbox. So, I say the yes part is look at your engagement data. That's really key in determining your inbox placement. If you are seeing good open rates, again, this depends on the industry you're in. But if you're seeing like 20, 30, 40% open rates, then you're hitting the inbox. What's even more helpful there is, how at Mailgun, we break that down by mailbox provider. So, you can pull up a campaign you recently sent and you can see how it did across Gmail, how it did across Microsoft, how it did across Oath mailboxes, Yahoo, AOL, Verizon, Comcast, others. So you can see if one particular provider you're struggling with and then make adjustments. So that's really helpful. So Is there a tool that just gives you the best thing for inbox placement? Not really. It's basically bolt some things together. But look at engagement. That's what I would do. Engagement is the best determining thing for that.
Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, big one. If using shared IPs with Mailgun and emails are being blocked by the receiver, does Mailgun automatically filter that shared IP out? Or do I need to see that in the logs and notify Mailgun that the shared IP can be removed from my pool? If Mailgun automatically swaps it out, how long does it take, and will that be blocked? And will that blocked email ever be resent?
There's a couple points on this.
There's a lot.
A couple points on this one that I can touch on. We don't change the IPs. We do rotate IPs out for our customers. It's based on different things. So like if we're seeing customers that have high bounce rates or complaint rates or some other kind of metric, like they're doing good things, then we'll move them into better pools or worse pools. But in terms of blacklist, currently, if an IP becomes blacklisted, we know about it on our side and we work as fast as we can to get it resolved, but we aren't going to change the IP immediately. If it's something that we can't get resolved, we can change it for you. But if you do notice something like that, reach out to our support team. I know we have a great support staff that's working 24/7, and they get these questions all the time, and they will gladly swap out your IP for you if it hasn't been fixed already.
Yeah.
And there was another point on that I think I wanted to mention. Let me see. Where's the question? How long does it take?
Will that block?
You mentioned resent. So we will not automatically resend it, but there's a cool little feature in our logs page or our logs tab in the admin panel that will allow you to resend specific messages. So say like one of your recipients reached out to you and say, I didn't receive this message. You check the logs and it did unfortunately get blocked. You can resend it from there without having to do something else. You just click a button and we'll resend it for you. So that's a really neat feature.
Yeah. Let's see. Do the email providers check the reply to an email address against some type of mail volume lookup to see if it should be blocked by a firewall?
Email providers check everything. Everything. I will tell you that. And I wouldn't doubt they check every little character in a message. They look at everything. What they do is they kind of call these signals. I've heard them referred to as signals. They're looking at reply to addresses, return paths, obviously the from address, URLs in the message themselves. So everything in a message, you should be of the understanding that it's going to get analyzed. Yeah. So the answer to that question is everything is looked at. Yeah. Especially with Gmail, they have very advanced algorithms.
Mm-hmm. But if you are like, if you're thinking about the use case of, I submitted a support ticket or a support email, and I'm worried that maybe the company hasn't gotten my support ticket email, right? Usually they have some sort of routing that allows that to get to another location that they will see. So it's not like somebody hasn't seen your support email. It might just be like maybe the ticket wasn't open, but usually unless something has gone wrong with the infrastructure, which if they've had it for a while, it usually won't, they will get that message if you're kind of alluding to that sort of situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. Does the sender name affect the spam
rating? Same as that last question. Everything does. Everything is impacted, especially things that can be easily identified across multiple messages. Things like, sender names, domains. And by sender name, you may be thinking friendly name in an email address. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, same kind of thing as the last answer. Everything's being checked.
Yeah, and I see kind of the comment underneath it. Does sending an email as someone else, i.e. Dave via no reply at somebusiness.com.
Well, it depends what Dave via no reply at somebusiness.com has been doing. So it impacts things, but if he's getting good, if that specific address is getting good engagement, then you're going to have positive results. Yeah. But if Dave is up to no good and sending out messages to people that don't want them, that will have a lingering effect.
And we got one more. Is there a way you can guarantee an email will be received? Have the receiver whitelist the sending address, etc. Whitelisting tips.
So whitelisting can happen. It's not really done by big mailbox providers anymore. I know AOL used to have a whitelist. That service is no longer available. But if we're talking like, B2B, especially like if you have a contact at the recipient company that you're sending a message to, and you have like information about what you're sending, whether it's IP addresses, domains, you can provide that information to them and guarantee delivery. But in general, yeah, like guaranteeing delivery is something that really isn't possible. That's why you'll hear people say, 100% deliverability, 100% delivery isn't really possible, just because things happen. But yeah, whitelisting you can do with certain mail servers.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think that's it. Yeah. All the questions we got. So do you want to go take this to the kitchen?
No, I'm gonna eat it all right.
Oh, he's going
now.
Oh, he's going. Okay, well, and with that, we're gonna devour this cake. We'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one.
Bye. Man, it's really good.